So there's sometimes movies I like that literally no one else does. The best example of this was how I loved Superman versus Batman, despite the fact that nobody else liked it. It's kind of hard for me to think of another example off the top of my head. Oh, Speed Racer. I really like Speed Racer, and that got bad reviews. So I loved those two movies, but they were critically panned. And this is another example of that because I really liked Venom, actually. Is it a great movie? No. Is it like particularly inspired or like super like the best? No, but that's okay. It did what it set out to be. It was a fun comic book movie. It was an enjoyable time for the hour and a half or whatever it was. I left it with a smile on my face, having enjoyed the last 2 hours. And I mean, at the end of the day, there's nothing wrong with that. Not everything has to be some like huge meta narrative, like philosophy of deconstructing VG tropes from a wiki or some nonsense like that. So I like the movie. So just a bit of background. This film has been critically panned. Critics are saying this film is terrible. And the reason I think they're saying that is because they're shills for Disney. And we've long since known this. They give every Marvel movie, no matter how crappy it is, high reviews. Thor the Dark World got 66%, and I wouldn't even give that movie 1%. Thor the Dark World was one of the worst movies I've ever seen. They gave Iron Man 2 73%, and they gave Thor Ragnarok 93%. They'll give anything a high rating. They like the first two Avengers movies, for God's sakes. So they just like anything that Marvel Disney makes, and they hate everything that DC makes. To be fair, everything DC makes sucks. But as I've said in the past, I'd rather watch a bad DC movie than an okay Marvel movie, because DC movies are fascinating what messes they are. Like Justice League, I liked more than any of the Avengers movies because Justice League was just so irrational, so poorly made, so illogical. It was incredible to watch, and I could watch that movie like a dozen times and still find stuff that's hilarious about it. So I like that way more than any of the Avengers movies, which I would never watch again. So yeah, they like the Disney movies. They hate this. But you know what? One of the things that I was excited about going into this movie was that it's not a Marvel Cinematic Universe movie at all. It has no connection to it. And that's really cool. It's kind of like with when they made Man of Steel. There's none of this like intertextual, we're going to bring in all these random references to other unrelated movies. Nonsense. This movie is a self-contained story. And that's the problem with a lot of the Marvel Universe movies is when they start to go downhill for me was when they started to be mostly about like referencing other movies and less about the actual plot. To me, kind of the ultimate example of this is Iron Man 2, where like the whole movie is Scarlett Johansson sitting at Tony Stark's desk, like harassing him to join the Avengers, and Nick Fury, Samuel L. Jackson, just like staring at him disappointedly. And the story, whatever it was with Mickey Rourke, was an afterthought that went nowhere. Yeah, the whole movie was just random references to other films, and most of the Marvel Cinematic Universe movies have become that, to the point where just nothing happens. This one, totally self-contained story. I love that. I went into this film going, I don't care what the critics say. I'm finally going to see a comic book movie that's not in part of some dumb cinematic universe, although there is actually going to be a Spider-Man cinematic universe that will exist alongside Spider-Man in the Marvel Cinematic Universe and the Enter the Spider-Verse. So there's going to be the Spider-Verse, the Sony Cinematic Spider-Man universe, and the Spider-Man in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. That's like the dumbest thing I've ever heard, but I digress. So let's talk about the movie. As I said, I like this movie. So let's just get into the plot. So the hero of this movie is Eddie Brock. Okay, same as the same character as from Spider-Man 3. Okay, he's kind of similar in some ways. He is a hard-hitting investigative reporter played by Tom Hardy. I love Tom Hardy. He's an alpha male. He's a massive Chad. Him being in this movie is good from the get go. So he's a hard hitting reporter, and his fiancee, Michelle, played by the QT Michelle Williams, is his fiancee, and she's a lawyer. And they're hopefully going to get married and have lots of beautiful, high IQ children. So, meanwhile, we have our villain, Drake. And I was disappointed to learn it was not Drake the rapper, who's the villain of my home city of Toronto. But he's like some Indian randoid from Britain who has a plan. He's like, there's global warming, the world's going to explode in the next 10 minutes. The planet's going to be rendered uninhabitable. Nothing's going to be able to live here. But what about when the world was like completely underwater, and there was only bacteria and like the land was still cooling? No, nothing is going to be able to live on this planet. So we need to find another planet. So while they're in space, they find the symbiotes, and there's 4 of them. Although 2 of them play absolutely no role whatsoever in this movie. So take that for what it's worth. So they're taking them back to Earth, and one of them escapes, and the other 3 are taken back to San Francisco, where Drake starts to try to merge the symbiotes with humans, because it turns out the symbiotes can't exist within a oxygen rich atmosphere without a host, and the symbiotes just kill the hosts one after another. You have to be like 100% genetic match for it to work, because that's how the plot says it'll work. And I'm sure there's no points for guessing what character in this story, or what characters are 100% match for the symbiote. So Eddie Brock gets the opportunity to interview Drake about his spaceship, and instead Eddie Brock asks some retarded questions about Drake's medical experiments on poor people, which he was told not to. He was told not to. His girlfriend told him not to. There was no reason to do it, and in fact, what he did was his girlfriend was working for a law firm that was working for Drake, and he snooped on her computer and stole documents from her that he used to confront Drake. So he gets fired from his job. His girlfriend gets fired. She tells him to go fuck himself. She calls him like a self-centered asshole, which is true, and I'm on her side. Eddie, like, there was no reason for doing what he did. Even if we're saying, well, Drake is evil and he's probably going to lead to the destruction of the world, Eddie Brock was in no position. Well, A, he didn't know that. B, Eddie Brock was in no position to do anything about him. He didn't have any hard evidence. He didn't have any power. Like, discretion is the better part of valor. If you want to take down Drake, fine. He's a terrible rapper, and the 6 is a truly awful name for Toronto. But, like, you got to have a plan when you're going to this. You can't just go, I'm just going to go and yell random shit at him during an interview, and that's what he does. So Brock is not able to get a job again, so he's living in a crappy apartment that's still bigger and better than any apartment I could ever afford. I love the understanding of, like, poverty to people in Hollywood. I mean, so they're like, oh, his bathroom's dirty. And I'm like, well, why doesn't he just clean his bathroom? If he cleaned it, it would probably be fine. But his apartment is huge. It's massive. And I was like, I couldn't afford that if I spent half my salary on it. But yeah, so he's down on his luck. He's living by himself. Drake just keeps feeding more and more people into the machine, into the symbiotes. So one of the scientist, Dora Skirth, seeks out Eddie, and she's like, this is messed up. He's feeding all these people to the symbiotes. You gotta come. You gotta come and help us. So he goes, he finally agrees. He goes in, he takes pictures of all the stuff that's happening in the lab, the people getting eaten alive, etc. And he comes across a homeless woman he met earlier on in the movie. And she's in one of the holding cells, and he breaks her out, and Venom is in her, and she goes into Eddie. And Eddie absorbs Venom, and Eddie is a perfect match. So as Eddie escapes, he starts to display Venom powers, so super strength, super speed. Venom can reform himself at will. He can kind of shoot out tendrils, kind of like Spider-Man can. Actually, this movie does a really good job with just all the Venom powers. It's really fun and creative to watch. They did a good job with utilizing kind of the unique abilities of Venom in the action scenes. I really like that part. So he succeeds in this escaping, and kind of like all, and this almost is kind of like a self-referential parody of similar people getting superpowers. So Venom is obsessed with eating because he has to eat. So he like tries to make Eddie eat for two. So Venom really likes tater tots. So he eats like 2 bags of tater tots. He drinks a whole bunch of water. He's so hungry he takes a rotting chicken out of the garbage and eats that, and then throws up. And then Venom starts to talk to him. He's like, "Look, Eddie, you're a loser. But if we work together, we can make our way out of this. You and me." And this is kind of like, it kind of becomes a bit of a buddy thing because Venom starts off as being this evil guy who just wants to eat people and kill people. And kind of over the course of the movie, he gradually warms up to Eddie. He's like, you know what? Earth is pretty cool. It's pretty beautiful here. People aren't that bad. My planet was kind of shitty. And he tells Eddie later on, look, Eddie, I was kind of a loser on my planet. I was kind of like the you of the symbiote planet. But on this planet, you and I, we can be top dogs. Because no one else has powers like me except for Spider-Man, who hasn't shown up yet in this universe. And so as the movie goes on, we start to see them kind of go from adversaries and hating each other to kind of like buddies. And it's a lot of fun. Is it the best done cinematic relationship? No, but it's a fun buddy cop kind of movie. And Venom eventually gets kind of funny because he just starts saying things like his Eddie's fiance has moved on and is seeing this doctor guy, and Venom's just keeps going, "We're gonna get her back, Eddie. She's gonna be ours again," and stuff like that. So that happens. There's a scene where he goes crazy, where he goes up to his fiance, and he just starts acting like a psycho. He jumps in the lobster tank and starts eating one of the lobsters fresh, alive. Apparently, Venom needs to eat living things or plants, because plants don't really die in the same way, I guess, that animals do. So he likes tater tots. He likes like live fish and stuff like that. So they examine Eddie. They obviously find out he has a symbiote. Drake sends out the his squad to go and get Eddie, and we're treated to a really cool. I actually really liked it. It's kind of reminds me of the chase scene a bit in Black Panther, where Eddie is on his motorcycle and he's speeding through. He's speeding through San Francisco. It's a really fun scene. You have all the creative Venom powers, etc. You have Venom and Eddie kind of like bantering and stuff. It's just kind of a fun scene in the film. And Drake realizes he wants to take Eddie alive. So we go through kind of our third act drama. Eddie gets to remove Venom using the ultrasonic frequency from an MRI. However, and he gets captured by Drake and taken to his lab. And Drake is going to torture him to find out where Venom is. And then he decides he's going to kill Eddie because Venom's not around. But I digress. Oh, by the way, meanwhile, when all this is happening, one of the symbiotes that had escaped has been jumping from person to person to get from Malaysia to San Francisco. And that symbiote possesses Drake, and it's a complete perfect fit. It's 100% symbiosis. Drake is now a symbiote named Riot, which is actually kind of a cool name. That's not a bad name at all. I kind of liked it, actually. Who was the team leader, whereas Venom was the team runt. And it turns out the whole thing was a plan to invade their planet somehow, because they left the random capsule drifting in space with the 4 symbiotes in stasis, so humans would pick it up and bring it back to Earth. So then they would possess the humans and fly a rocket back to space to pick up the rest of the symbiotes and bring them to Earth. Why didn't you guys just fly your spaceship straight to Earth? What's with this whole leaving it in space thing? Never question me or I cut you. It's kind of how it goes. But so they're torturing Eddie. So Michelle Williams puts on the Venom suit, and we get Lady Venom which is a mixture of hot and scary beyond all imagining. So she and Eddie kiss. Eddie gets Venom back. Venom's like, Eddie, I love you. I love this planet. Let's go kick some ass and let's save the world. So there's a big long fight scene of him of Eddie and Venom versus Carnage and Drake. Not Carnage and Drake, Riot and Drake. Riot manages to win and gets on the spaceship. He's gonna go into space and get back the other symbiotes. So as they're going into space, Venom jumps up and opens the fuel tank on the rocket, so the fuel spills into the afterburner, and the whole thing explodes. Fire's apparently the weakness of a symbiote, and Riot dies, and presumably Venom dies because Venom's like definitely dead and can't not die because of a sequel. So it turns out, of course, that Venom didn't die, and Venom's like, "Don't worry, Eddie. We're gonna get your waifu back. We're gonna get your QT back." And so like the film ends with like kind of another quirky scene where he goes to a where he's telling Venom, he's like, "Look, there's ground rules. You can't eat people unless they're evil." It's like, how do we know if they're evil? It's like, you just know. So they go into a convenience store near where Eddie lives, and it's getting robbed by some, I don't know if he's Hispanic or Chinese or whatever. But he goes up, and Venom gives like this big speech about like how if he ever finds him again, he's gonna cut off his legs and shit. And Venom's like, you know what? Just screw it, and he just eats the guy. And it's like, what do we do now? And Venom's like, whatever the hell we want. And then the movie ends. And I walked down like that was a fun movie. Venom's kind of cool. Eddie's kind of cool. Michelle Williams' performance isn't bad. Drake sucked, but like honestly, decent action scenes, decent jokes, decent characters, fun movie. If you want a serious movie, don't see this. But if you're in the mood for just a popcorn flick, then go see it. I give Venom 2 thumbs up. Fun times at the movies. I'll talk to you guys later.